I've been secretly paying my biological daughter's college tuition for 4 years. My wife doesn't know she exists. 15 years ago, I was a broke graduate student desperately trying to pay off my student loans. That desperation led me to become a sperm donor at a local fertility clinic. They paid well, and I convinced myself I was helping couples who couldn't conceive. After completing the program, I moved on with my life, got married to Sarah, and built a successful investment firm. We have 2 sons now, and I thought that chapter of my life was firmly in the past. Then came the DNA ancestry test last Christmas. Sarah had gotten our whole family those popular DNA kits as gifts, thinking it would be fun to explore our heritage together. I remembered signing papers at the clinic about potential future contact, but I never thought much about it. The possibility seemed so distant back then. When Sarah eagerly swabbed our son's cheeks and handed me my kit, I felt the first twinge of unease, but I couldn't refuse without raising suspicions. A month after sending in our samples, I received a private message through the DNA website. Emily, a 21-year-old college student, had matched as my biological daughter. My heart nearly stopped when I saw her profile picture. She had my mother's eyes and my crooked smile. There was no denying the resemblance. I spent hours that night staring at her profile, seeing pieces of myself and my family reflected in her features. Emily explained that she'd been conceived through the sperm donation. Her mother, Karen, was a single woman who decided to have a child on her own. She assured me she wasn't looking for a father figure or to disrupt my life. She was simply curious about her biological background and wanted to know her medical history. Her maturity and consideration in approaching the situation only made the weight of my subsequent decisions heavier. We exchanged a few messages, keeping things casual and friendly. Then Emily mentioned she was struggling to stay in college. Karen had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and the medical bills were overwhelming. Emily was working 2 jobs, but she was falling behind on tuition payments. She never asked for money. She was simply venting about her situation. Reading about her exhaustion from working late shifts while maintaining a full course load and supporting her sick mother broke something inside me. That night, I couldn't sleep. The thought of my biological daughter dropping out of college while I had the means to help tormented me. I had been fortunate in my career, with more than enough to support my family, and then some. The next morning, I contacted the university's financial aid office and arranged to anonymously cover Emily's remaining tuition. The amount was significant, but not enough to raise questions from Sarah about our finances. 4 years have passed. I've watched from a distance as Emily thrived in college, made the dean's list, and pursued her dreams of becoming a pediatric nurse. Karen recovered from her cancer, but the medical bills had drained their savings. Every semester, I've continued to pay Emily's tuition through the anonymous donor program. I've created elaborate systems to hide the payments, using a separate account and carefully managing our tax returns to conceal this financial commitment. The weight of this secret has been crushing. Sarah and I have always shared everything, but I can't bring myself to tell her about Emily. It's not about the money. We could easily afford the tuition. I'm terrified that knowing I have a biological daughter would change how Sarah sees our family. Our sons are teenagers now, and I worry about how this might affect them. The older one has been talking about medical school, and sometimes I wonder if he inherited that desire to help others from me, just like Emily. Emily graduated last month. I watched the ceremony live stream from my office, telling Sarah I had an important meeting. When Emily's name was called, I felt an overwhelming mix of pride and shame. Pride in her accomplishments, shame in my cowardice for keeping her existence hidden from my family. Watching her walk across that stage, confident and accomplished, I saw glimpses of the same determination I recognized in my sons. Last week, Emily sent me a message. Karen had told her about an anonymous donor who'd paid her tuition all these years. Emily had figured out it was me. She thanked me, but also asked why I'd never mentioned it. She wondered if I was ashamed of her. The question cut deeper than any accusation could have. Her message has been haunting me. The truth is, I'm only ashamed of myself. I've helped Emily in secret because I'm too afraid to face the consequences of my past decisions. Sarah is the most understanding person I know, but this feels different. This isn't just about money or even about having a biological child from before our marriage. It's about maintaining this deception for 4 years, about all the lies I've told to cover this secret. I've convinced myself that keeping this secret protects my family, but lately I've been wondering if I'm just protecting myself. Emily deserves better than to be treated like a shameful secret. My wife deserves the truth. My sons deserve to know about their half-sister. But every time I think about confessing, I imagine the look of betrayal on Sarah's face and my courage fails me. I've started having nightmares about Sarah discovering the truth through another DNA match or a financial record I failed to hide. The irony isn't lost on me that I'm finally sharing this story here. anonymously, rather than with the people who deserve to know. Maybe writing this out is my first step toward finding the courage to tell the truth, or maybe I'm just a coward who will carry this secret to his grave. Either way, the weight of it grows heavier every day, and I'm beginning to realize that the longer I wait, the more damage my eventual confession might cause. The truth has a way of coming out, and I'm terrified that when it does, I'll lose everything I've been trying so desperately to protect. Story number 2. I found out why my father died protecting our family's safe during the home invasion. What I discovered inside changed everything I knew about him. 15 years ago, my father died a hero. That's what everyone told us, how he fought off armed intruders who broke into our home, giving my mother and me enough time to escape through the basement window. The robbers shot him in front of the family safe, which he refused to open. The police said he died protecting our family's valuables. Yesterday, I finally learned what he was really protecting, and now I understand why he chose to die that night. I was 13 when it happened. My father worked as a senior financial analyst at Meridian Pharmaceuticals, one of the largest drug companies in the country. He'd been acting strange in the weeks before the break-in, working late, constantly checking over his shoulder, moving money between accounts. My mother assumed he was preparing for a promotion. We were wrong. The safe remained locked after his death. My mother never opened it, saying Dad would have wanted us to wait until we really needed what was inside. We assumed it contained bonds, insurance documents, maybe some family heirlooms. Life insurance paid off our house, and my mother's teaching salary kept us afloat. The safe became a memorial of sorts, gathering dust in my father's old office. Last month, my mother was diagnosed with an aggressive form of leukemia. The treatment costs were astronomical, even with insurance. She finally suggested we open the safe, hoping Dad had left something that could help. I borrowed her key and drove to the house last night, 15 years of curiosity and dread building in my stomach. The documents I found told a story that made my blood run cold. My father hadn't been just an analyst. He discovered that Meridian had deliberately covered up fatal side effects in one of their best-selling blood pressure medications. They knew people were dying, but the profits were too good to pull the drug. Dad had spent months gathering evidence, building a case that would have brought down half the executive board. There were internal emails, clinical trial data, death reports, everything meticulously organized and documented. A sealed letter explained it all. He'd been planning to take the evidence to federal investigators the week after he died. The break-in wasn't random. They weren't robbers. They were sent to retrieve the evidence, and my father knew exactly what would happen when they came. The final piece was a thumb drive, carefully wrapped in his handwritten note explaining what to do with the information. He'd known he might not survive long enough to expose the truth. The note detailed names of journalists, federal agents, and lawyers who could be trusted. He'd arranged everything, created a dead man's switch that would activate if he couldn't complete the mission himself, but he never told us. He carried the burden alone to protect us from becoming targets. The note explained how they'd threatened him, mentioned photos of me walking to school, of my mother in the grocery store. He knew that if he exposed the truth while he was alive, they would have come after us next. His death was meant to throw them off, make them think the evidence died with him. The truth hit me like a physical blow. For 15 years, I'd mourned a father I thought died protecting mere possessions. Instead, he'd sacrificed himself trying to save countless lives, choosing to die so my mother and I could live. The heroes in movies get to expose the truth and live to see justice done. My father had to choose between justice and his family's safety. He chose us. Now, I'm sitting here staring at the evidence that cost my father his life. The drug was quietly pulled from the market 5 years ago, but the executives who made those decisions are still out there. Some have retired to luxury estates, others moved to different companies. They all escaped consequences for the lives they destroyed. The statute of limitations for some of the crimes has expired, but not all of them. The journalist names in my father's notes, I recognize some of them. They're bigger names now, known for exposing corporate corruption. The federal agents he listed, some have moved up to senior positions. His network of allies has only grown stronger while the evidence sat waiting in our safe. My father's death didn't stop justice, it just delayed it. My mother needs the best treatment available, and Meridian Pharmaceuticals' current CEO sits on the board of the top cancer research hospital in the state. One phone call from me with this evidence would probably get her priority admission and coverage for every experimental treatment available. The old guard at Meridian would pay anything to keep this quiet. But that's not what my father died for. He gave his life trying to expose the truth, protecting us so that one day, when it was safe, someone could finish what he started. That someone has to be me. The same blood that ran through his veins, the blood he spilled protecting this evidence, runs through mine. The hardest part is that I can't tell my mother. Her cancer leaves her vulnerable, and the stress of knowing the truth about dad's death could harm her recovery. She needs to focus on healing, not reopening old wounds, so I'll carry this secret for now, just like my father did, but I won't carry it forever. I've spent the day making copies of everything, storing them in secure locations. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with one of the journalists from my father's list. She's built her career exposing corporate corruption, and her latest target is pharmaceutical industry fraud. My father's evidence might be old, but it's a thread that could unravel decades of corporate cover-ups. The people who ordered my father's death thought time would bury their secrets. Instead, it just gave their crimes time to compound interest. Every decision they've made since then, every other crime they've committed thinking they were safe, will now be scrutinized. The evidence my father died protecting isn't just a smoking gun, it's the key to finding all the other bodies they've buried. I started this morning thinking I was finally going to understand why my father died. Now I understand why he lived, and how he's going to keep on living through what I do with his legacy. The hard part isn't exposing the truth. The hard part is knowing that somewhere in this city, there's another 13-year-old kid whose parents are fighting the same fight my father did. This time though, they won't have to fight alone.